The night air in New York carried a damp chill as Sophia Martinez hurried down the cracked sidewalk, her canvas sneakers slapping softly against the wet concrete. The rain had stopped an hour ago, but the street still glistened beneath the yellow halo of the street lamps, reflecting the skeletal outlines of fire escapes and faded brick walls. She adjusted the strap of the diaper bag on her shoulder and glanced down at the stroller she was pushing. Inside, 6-month-old Emma stirred, letting out a soft whimper as if to remind her mother that bedtime had long passed. Sophia's body ached from the late shift at the diner. Her wrist still smelled faintly of coffee and dish soap. Her feet burned inside worn-out shoes that should have been replaced months ago. But she didn't complain. She couldn't afford to. Every extra hour meant another small buffer for formula, diapers, or the electric bill. She pressed the elevator button in the dim lobby of Greenview Towers and waited, tapping her foot lightly to soothe Emma. The building, once elegant, now looked like it had been forgotten by time. The wallpaper peeled in long, curling strips, the overhead light flickered with a tired buzz, and the brass elevator doors bore scratches like scars. This was home, not because she loved it, but because it was all she could manage on her tips and single paycheck. Still, there was a strange sense of community here, elderly neighbors leaving casseroles at her door, kids playing in the hallway. For Emma's sake, she held on to that small comfort. The elevator dinged, the doors creaked open, and Sophia maneuvered the stroller inside. Just as the doors began to slide shut, a strong hand caught the edge. A tall man stepped in, a man whose presence immediately shifted the air. His suit was dark, impeccably tailored, his shoes gleamed even in the weak light. His hair was neatly combed back, and the faint scent of cedarwood cologne followed him as he entered. He pressed the button for the top floor without a word. Sophia froze for half a heartbeat. She had seen him before in passing. Rumors spread quickly in old buildings like this. He was the man who had recently purchased the penthouse, the new owner everyone whispered about. Daniel Blackwood. A name that sounded like it belonged on magazine covers, not in this aging tower. The elevator lurched upward, humming through the ancient cables. Emma began to fuss again, her tiny fists waving beneath the soft, pink blanket. Sophia tried to rock the stroller gently, whispering soothing nonsense. But as the elevator passed the third floor, there was a sudden, sharp jolt. The lights flickered, went out completely, and the metal box shuddered to a halt. Sophia's breath caught in her throat. Emma started crying, loud, panicked cries that echoed painfully in the small, dark space. "Oh, no, no, no," Sophia whispered, her voice trembling. She pressed the emergency button, but there was only static. In the darkness, a calm voice spoke. "It's okay. Take a deep breath." She turned toward the sound. The man's phone lit up his face, casting a pale glow over sharp cheekbones and steady grey eyes. He crouched slightly, bringing himself closer to Emma's level. "She's just scared," he said softly. "Babies pick up on energy. If you panic, she will too." Sophia tried to inhale slowly, her hands shaking. I'm not good at this when she cries like that," she admitted, embarrassed by how vulnerable she sounded in front of a stranger in a $1,000 suit. To her surprise, he didn't judge her. He slipped off his suit jacket and laid it carefully on the floor. "Mind if I?" he asked, nodding toward Emma. She hesitated. I guess?" He reached into the diaper bag like he'd done it before, pulling out wipes and a clean diaper with practiced ease. Then, in the glow of his phone's flashlight, he knelt down and began to change Emma right there in the elevator. His movements were deliberate, efficient, and, most shockingly, gentle. Emma blinked at the unexpected stranger, her cries tapering into curious little coos. Sophia stared, stunned. "You know how to do that?" He gave a short, quiet laugh. "I have a niece. Spent a summer helping my sister when she had twins. Believe me, I've seen worse situations than a stuck elevator." The absurdity of the moment broke through Sophia's exhaustion. She laughed softly, the sound shaky but real. Emma's cries turned to hiccups, then to silence. The man handed the baby back, now bundled snugly again. "There," he said. "All good." The emergency lights finally blinked on, dim but steady. Sophia exhaled for what felt like the first time since the elevator stopped. She noticed how the warm light softened his features, not cold like she'd imagined, but kind, observant. For a moment, in that metal box suspended between floors, the outside world faded. There was just her daughter, and a stranger who didn't act like a stranger. "Thank you," she murmured. He met her eyes with quiet sincerity. "You don't have to thank me. She's a beautiful little girl." Before she could respond, the elevator jerked again and slowly resumed its ascent. When the doors opened at the penthouse level, he stepped out first, then turned back. "I'll make sure the building fixes this," he said simply, as if it were a personal promise. Then he disappeared down the hall. Sophia rode the last few floors alone, her heart thudding strangely. She didn't know what had just happened, but something about that brief, intense encounter lodged itself inside her chest like a spark waiting to catch. Morning sunlight spilled weakly through the cracked blinds of apartment 4B, painting thin stripes across the worn linoleum floor. Sophia Martinez stood by the small kitchen counter, rocking Emma's carrier gently with one foot, while trying to spread peanut butter on 2 slices of bread. The kettle whistled, a shrill sound that filled the cramped space. Her dark hair was pulled into a loose bun, stray strands framing her tired but gentle face. There was no luxury here, no stainless steel appliances, no marble countertops, just second-hand furniture, chipped paint, and the faint scent of baby lotion clinging to the air. Emma, dressed in a yellow onesie with tiny ducks, watched her mother with wide, curious eyes. Sophia leaned down and kissed her daughter's forehead, breathing in that soft, warm baby smell that somehow made the exhaustion worth it. "We've got a long day, sweetheart," she murmured. "Let's survive breakfast first." She packed a bottle of formula, checked the extra diaper supply in the bag twice, and then glanced at the clock. 6:42 a.m. She had less than 20 minutes to drop Emma at Mrs. Thompson's, the elderly neighbor who babysat for a modest fee, before catching the early subway to the diner. Another day, another marathon of orders, spills, and fake smiles for impatient customers. The hallway outside her door smelled faintly of mildew, and the overhead lights buzzed with a persistent flicker. Greenview Towers had been built in the late 1960s, and time had not been kind. The elevator had good days and bad ones, the heating worked when it wanted to, and the paint peeled like old wallpaper in a forgotten motel. Yet this building was home to a patchwork of families, retirees, and single parents who made do with what they had. In the mornings, neighbors greeted each other with tired smiles, children chased one another down the halls, and music leaked from various apartments like a shared heartbeat. Sophia walked past Mrs. Thompson's door and handed over Emma, her chest tightening a little each time she left her. "She just had her bottle," Sophia said softly. "I'll be back by 6. Mrs. Thompson, a white-haired woman with kind eyes and floral housecoats, waved her off. "Don't you worry, sweetheart. Emma and I have a date with some lullabies." The subway ride to the diner was crowded, a crush of bodies, perfume, sweat, and early morning chatter. Sophia stood wedged between a businessman scrolling through his phone and a teenager bobbing his head to music through oversized headphones. She kept one hand on her bag, the other wrapped around the cold metal pole, and let her mind drift to Emma's smile. It was that smile that kept her going, the tiny proof that she wasn't just surviving, she was building something. At the diner, the rhythm was relentless. Orders barked from the kitchen, coffee refilled before customers had to ask, plates balanced on tired wrists. Sophia wore a faded pink uniform with her name stitched above the breast pocket, her sneakers squeaking against the tiled floor. By noon, her feet throbbed and her back ached, but she never let it show. Regulars loved her for her warmth. She remembered their favorite meals, their kids' names, their stories. When her shift finally ended after sunset, she returned to Greenview Towers with a mix of relief and weariness. The lobby, with its faded armchairs and outdated mailboxes, greeted her like an old friend she couldn't quite leave behind. She checked her mailbox, mostly bills, and pressed the elevator button. It groaned before answering, as if reluctantly doing its job. This was Sophia's world, small, flawed, but hers. A world where every dollar counted, every smile from Emma was gold, and dreams were postponed, but never completely forgotten. The black limousine parked outside Greenview Towers had been turning heads all week. Residents had whispered about the mysterious new tenant moving into the penthouse, something no one had lived in for years. A delivery truck came on Monday with sleek furniture wrapped in white, followed by a crew of men in suits on Tuesday. By Wednesday, the whispers had names: Daniel Blackwood. He first appeared in the lobby one crisp Thursday morning, dressed in a dark tailored coat, his steps measured and assured. He carried himself like a man who knew exactly where he belonged, which made his presence in this old building all the more striking. The doorman, who usually slouched on his stool reading newspapers, stood up straighter when Daniel walked by. Even the elevator seemed to behave better, arriving smoothly, as if aware of its new passenger. Daniel wasn't the type to linger in common spaces. He moved quietly, almost like he was observing rather than participating. The penthouse, once dusty and abandoned, now glowed faintly at night, its balcony lights cutting through the city haze. Sophia saw him for the second time one late afternoon, when she returned from the diner with Emma in her arms. She stepped into the lobby just as Daniel exited the elevator, phone pressed to his ear. His expression was focused, the kind of focus she associated with people who never worried about late rent or empty refrigerators. For a moment, their eyes met, hers wide and unsure, his cool and unreadable. Then he nodded politely and walked past, his cologne lingering faintly in the air like a memory she didn't expect to keep. She didn't know then that he wasn't just a wealthy stranger living upstairs. He wasn't just the man who had knelt on the elevator floor to help her baby. Daniel Blackwood had a reason for being here, a reason tied to her past in ways she couldn't yet imagine. Later that night, as she rocked Emma to sleep, she glanced out the window. The penthouse balcony light was on. A tall silhouette moved against the glass, looking down at the city below like a man standing between two worlds. Sophia wondered what someone like him thought of a place like Greenview Towers. She couldn't have known that he wasn't looking down on it with disdain, but with quiet intent. The night had the kind of quiet that made every small sound echo through the building's old bones. It was just past 9 when Sophia stepped into the lobby of Greenview Towers, her shoulders drooping under the weight of the diaper bag. Emma, cradled against her chest in a soft baby carrier, let out a sleepy sigh. The air smelled faintly of damp carpet and old paint, a scent she'd long grown used to. The elevator doors were slow to open, their metallic groan filling the otherwise empty lobby. Sophia pressed the up button and stepped inside, adjusting Emma's blanket as she reached for the 4th floor button. The elevator shuddered slightly like a tired beast waking from a nap. She leaned against the side panel, closing her eyes for just a moment. Her entire body ached. The day at the diner had been brutal, an endless stream of customers, a broken coffee machine, and a new manager who seemed to enjoy finding fault in everything. She longed for a hot shower, warm pajamas, and the quiet of her little apartment. Just as the doors were closing, a hand slipped through the narrowing gap. The sensors clicked, the doors reopened, and a tall figure stepped in, Daniel Blackwood. Even in the dim, flickering elevator light, there was no mistaking him. His charcoal coat hung perfectly from his broad shoulders, and the clean, understated scent of cedarwood cologne followed him as he entered. He pressed the button for the penthouse, and the elevator began its slow ascent. Sophia straightened instinctively, her heartbeat picking up for reasons she couldn't explain. It wasn't just that he was handsome in a distant, untouchable way. It was the way the air seemed to rearrange itself when he was near, like he carried a quiet command of any space he entered. She kept her gaze on the glowing floor numbers, silently praying for the ride to be quick. Emma shifted, letting out a tiny, restless sound. Sophia hummed softly, patting her daughter's back. The elevator creaked past the second floor. Then it happened. A loud, metallic clank. The lights flickered once, twice, then went out completely. The elevator gave a violent jolt, and everything stopped. The sudden stillness was deafening. Sophia gasped, clutching Emma tighter. The baby startled awake, her soft whimper swelling into a sharp, terrified cry that bounced off the elevator's steel walls. "No, no, no, please," Sophia whispered, her voice trembling. She pressed the emergency button. Nothing, just a burst of static that crackled and died. Her hands were shaking now. She'd always hated elevators, and the thought of being trapped in one with her baby sent her chest tightening like a vice. In the darkness, Daniel's voice broke through, steady and low. "It's okay," he said calmly. "Take a breath." She turned toward where she thought he was standing, heart hammering. The faint glow of his phone lit up his face, throwing his features into sharp relief. His grey eyes looked different in the half-light, less distant, more grounded. "These old buildings have power issues," he continued. "They'll get it back online soon." Emma's cries grew louder, urgent and panicked. Sophia tried bouncing her gently, but her nerves made her movements jerky. "She hates the dark," she admitted, her voice breaking. She gets scared and Hey," he interrupted softly, crouching down a little to bring himself closer to Emma's line of sight. "She's picking up on your fear. Let's calm her together." Sophia blinked. "Together?" Daniel set his phone on the floor with the flashlight facing up, casting a warm, soft glow around them. The small metal box suddenly felt less suffocating. He took off his coat and spread it neatly on the elevator floor, like he'd done this before. "Mind if I try?" he asked, his tone gentle, not commanding, not intrusive. She hesitated for only a second before nodding. Daniel moved with surprising ease. He gently took Emma from her carrier, holding her like someone who knew how to support a baby's tiny head. He started humming, a low, steady tune that resonated in the quiet. His large hands moved with practiced care as he loosened her blanket, checking to see if she was uncomfortable. Then he did something that stunned Sophia entirely. He pulled out wipes and a diaper from her bag without even asking, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "You know what you're doing," she breathed, almost incredulous. A quiet smile flickered across his face. "My sister has twins. I spent a summer being her unpaid babysitter. I've seen every kind of diaper disaster there is." Despite the fear in the cramped space, a laugh slipped out of her, a small, shaky sound, but real. Emma's cries softened into hiccups as Daniel finished changing her with the kind of efficiency that made Sophia both grateful and oddly disarmed. He wrapped Emma back in her blanket, rocking her gently. The baby's tiny fingers curled against his shirt, her eyelids fluttering. "There we go," he murmured. "Nothing to cry about, little one." Sophia watched, momentarily forgetting the stuck elevator, the day's exhaustion, the walls closing in. She saw him not as the untouchable CEO everyone whispered about, but as a man sitting cross-legged on an elevator floor, cradling her baby with quiet patience. It was surreal. The emergency lights flickered on then, weak but steady. Sophia exhaled shakily, leaning against the wall. "Thank you," she said softly. I usually handle things on my own." Daniel met her eyes, and for the first time, his gaze wasn't distant. "Everyone needs help sometimes," he said simply. A moment later, the elevator jerked back to life. It moved upward with a groan before stopping at the penthouse level. Daniel stood, handing Emma back carefully. "You're stronger than you think," he added, almost like an afterthought. Then he stepped out, turning down the hallway without looking back. The doors slid shut, and Sophia was left alone, clutching Emma against her chest. Her pulse was still racing, not from fear anymore, but from something she couldn't name. The ride to the 4th floor felt shorter than ever, though a part of her wished it hadn't ended just yet. The next morning unfolded like so many others, with the sound of Emma's soft babbling pulling Sophia from a shallow, dreamless sleep. Sunlight filtered weakly through the blinds, catching the dust motes that floated lazily in the still air. Sophia blinked groggily at the ceiling for a few seconds before sitting up. Her back ached from the late shift, but the memory of the night before was sharper than the fatigue. A man in a dark coat, kneeling on the elevator floor, humming softly while holding her daughter. She shook her head, almost laughing at the absurdity of it. Men like Daniel Blackwood didn't get stuck in elevators with single mothers from the 4th floor. Men like him didn't change diapers under flashlight beams. It had to be one of those strange New York moments, something surreal and fleeting, that she'd tell Emma about when she was older. She fed Emma, changed her clothes, and prepared for another day at the diner. Life didn't pause just because something unusual had happened. Bills didn't stop arriving in the mail because a handsome stranger had been unexpectedly kind. As she tied her hair back in the small mirror by the door, her phone buzzed on the counter. The screen lit up with an unfamiliar number. She hesitated. Unknown numbers usually meant telemarketers or bill collectors. But some quiet instinct made her swipe the screen open. Daniel Blackwood. "Good morning, Sophia. I hope Emma is well. I'd like to talk to you when you have some time. Coffee?" My treat. Her stomach did a strange flip. He had her number. Of course he did. Management probably had access to tenant contacts. Still, seeing his name flash on her screen felt surreal, almost invasive and intimate at the same time. She reread the message 3 times, unsure if it was real. The phrasing was polite, almost formal, but there was a hint of something genuine beneath it. She thought of ignoring it. People like him didn't really have coffee with people like her. She pictured herself sitting across from him in her diner uniform, trying to make conversation while he wore an expensive suit and checked his watch. Emma let out a gurgling laugh from her playmat, as if amused by her mother's hesitation. Sophia sighed, picking her up and resting the baby against her hip. "What do you think, little one? Should Mommy have coffee with Mr. Fancy Penthouse?" Emma answered with a happy squeal, which Sophia decided to interpret as a yes. But reality kicked in. She had work. She couldn't just drop everything for some unexpected invitation, so she typed back cautiously, "Sophia." "Hi, Emma's good, thank you. I'm working all day, but I finish at 6. The reply came almost instantly. "Daniel." "Great, there's a cafe on Lexington and 45th. 6:30? Don't worry, it's casual. Don't worry, it's casual." She could practically hear his smooth, confident tone through the words. She stared at the message, her mind spinning through every practical and emotional objection she could muster. What if this was about the elevator? Or the building? What could he possibly want to talk about? The thought of sitting across from him, with his composed grey eyes and immaculate suits, made her stomach tighten, not just with nerves, but with something warmer, something dangerous. All day at the diner, his message sat in the back of her mind like a folded note she couldn't stop thinking about. She moved through her shift on autopilot, pouring coffee, taking orders, smiling through exhaustion, while her thoughts kept drifting back to the way he had looked in that elevator light. Not cold, not distant, just human. When 6 o'clock finally came, Sophia hurried home, changed Emma's diaper, and handed her off to Mrs. Thompson with a hurried thank you. She didn't have time for fancy clothes, so she chose her nicest pair of dark jeans, a white blouse that wasn't stained, and a simple cardigan. She checked her reflection in the mirror one last time, not glamorous, but presentable. Her hair was down for once, falling softly around her shoulders. Her heart thudded in her chest as she whispered to herself, "It's just coffee." Nothing more? The cafe Daniel had chosen was warm and softly lit, with dark wood furniture and the comforting aroma of freshly ground beans. It wasn't a flashy place. It had a quiet elegance, the kind of spot where conversations carried a certain weight. She spotted him immediately. He sat near the window, wearing a navy sweater instead of a suit, his sleeves rolled up, a watch glinting under the light. He looked less like a CEO and more like a man who belonged anywhere he chose to be. As she approached, he stood, a gesture that felt both old-fashioned and disarmingly attentive. "Sophia," he greeted with a warm smile that caught her off guard. She had expected something distant and businesslike. Instead, he looked genuinely pleased to see her. "Hi," she replied, suddenly aware of every awkward step she took. They sat. For a moment, neither spoke, the hum of the cafe filling the silence. Then Daniel leaned forward slightly. "Thank you for coming." "I know you're busy." "I almost didn't," she admitted before she could stop herself. Her cheeks flushed, but his eyes softened with amusement. "I appreciate honesty," he said simply. "And I wouldn't have asked if it wasn't important." Sophia's brows knit. "Important?" Daniel paused, choosing his words carefully. "I moved into this building for a reason." "And it's connected to you." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning she couldn't yet grasp. Sophia's fingers tightened around her coffee cup, warmth seeping into her palms. For the first time, she realized this wasn't just a polite thank you for the elevator incident. Whatever this was, it was bigger. The cafe had grown quieter as the evening deepened. Outside the window, Lexington Avenue was bathed in the soft orange glow of street lamps. Cars passed by in a steady rhythm, their headlights gliding across the walls like fleeting brushstrokes. Inside, a low hum of conversation lingered, punctuated by the occasional hiss of the espresso machine. But at the small table by the window, time seemed to still. Sophia's fingers curled loosely around her coffee cup, its warmth grounding her as Daniel's last words echoed in her mind. "I moved into this building for a reason." "And it's connected to you?" She blinked, unsure if she had heard him correctly. "Connected to me?" she repeated cautiously, as if saying it too loudly would make the moment collapse. Daniel leaned back slightly, his grey eyes studying her, not with scrutiny, but with a calm deliberation, like he was about to share something long kept close. "Before I tell you everything," he began slowly, "I want you to know I didn't reach out on a whim." "I've thought about this for a long time." Sophia's stomach tightened. She had imagined a lot of possibilities for why a billionaire CEO might want to talk to her. Tenant issues, elevator repairs, maybe even some kind of charity initiative. But this, the way his voice carried a quiet gravity, felt far more personal. "I was 16, he continued, his gaze drifting briefly to the window, as if looking back through time. "I was attending St. Albans Prep, an old, pretentious private school upstate. One afternoon, there was a fire in the science wing. It spread faster than anyone expected. The alarms didn't go off on time. Students were trapped inside." Sophia listened, her breath caught somewhere between her chest and throat. Daniel's voice lowered, threaded with memory. "I was one of them." Smoke filled the hallways so thick you couldn't see 2 feet ahead. "I remember trying to find an exit, but I was disoriented. That's when I heard a woman's voice, firm, calm, cutting through the panic. She pulled me out of the hallway, wrapped a wet cloth around my face, and led me down a stairwell that wasn't marked as an exit. It was how she saved me and a few others. Later, I found out she was a teacher who had stayed behind to help." He paused, his jaw tightening slightly, the edges of old vulnerabilities surfacing. "Her name was Helen Carter." Sophia's hands went still. For a moment, the entire world narrowed to those 2 words. Helen Carter, her mother. The image of her mother's warm smile, chalk dust on her sleeves, came rushing back with startling clarity. She remembered Helen's stories about teaching, about the students she cared for, the way she always put others first. But the fire! Her mother had never told her about this. She swallowed, her voice barely above a whisper. "My mom," Daniel nodded slowly. "I didn't know she had a daughter back then. I was just a terrified teenager who never forgot the woman who saved his life. My father tried to send a donation afterward, but she refused. She didn't want recognition, didn't want her name in the papers. She just went back to work like nothing happened." "That kind of courage," his voice softened. "It stays with you." Sophia's throat tightened unexpectedly. Her mother had died years ago, but hearing someone else speak of her, not just as a mother, but as a hero, cracked something open inside her. She had grown up seeing Helen as strong, kind, endlessly giving, but she hadn't known this part of her history. She hadn't known her mother's actions had rippled out beyond their little world. She took a shaky breath. "You moved into Greenview Towers because—" Daniel's gaze met hers again, steady and deliberate. "Because I found out she lived there. And after she passed, I learned the building was tied to her family." It wasn't random, Sophia. "I bought the property because I wanted to make sure it didn't fall into the wrong hands, and because I needed to understand what happened after she died." Her pulse quickened. "What do you mean, tied to her family?" Daniel reached into the inner pocket of his coat and pulled out a folded document. Old, its edges slightly yellowed. He laid it gently on the table, like something precious. "I've been digging through old records." "Deeds, property transfers. It turns out Greenview Towers originally belonged to the Carter family. Your mother inherited partial ownership from her parents, but somewhere along the way, the Reeves family acquired the controlling share through a series of questionable legal moves." Sophia stared at the document, her heart pounding. She had grown up in this building, played in its hallways, watched neighbors grow old on these floors, but she had never imagined it had once belonged to her family. Daniel continued, his tone level but firm. "Victor Reeves has been running the building like his personal kingdom, raising rent illegally, threatening tenants, falsifying maintenance records. My company bought the property from a holding group a few months ago, and the more I looked, the more inconsistencies I found. The room felt smaller somehow, the walls drawing closer as the weight of what he was saying settled over her." Sophia brushed her fingers against the document, hesitant to touch it fully, as if it might burn her. I didn't know any of this," she whispered. "I didn't expect you to," Daniel replied gently. "Reeves has been very careful. But you have a right to know, Sophia. This isn't just the building where you live. It's your family's legacy." Her breath hitched. Legacy. It was a word that felt too big for her small, paycheck-to-paycheck life. She had spent years just trying to keep her head above water, never imagining she was standing on ground that once belonged to her mother. Daniel leaned forward, his eyes steady on hers. "I reached out because I didn't want to handle this without you. This started with Helen Carter. I think it should end with her daughter." The hum of the cafe faded into the background. Sophia sat in stunned silence, her fingers still resting on the edge of the paper, her mind spinning. The night in the elevator had felt like an odd twist of fate. But now, sitting across from the man her mother once saved, holding a fragment of her family's past, she realized this was no coincidence. It was the beginning of something much bigger. The cafe had emptied out by the time Sophia stepped back onto Lexington Avenue, clutching the folded document Daniel had given her as if it might vanish if she let go. The city night buzzed faintly, taxi horns in the distance, the rhythmic rumble of the subway beneath her feet. But her mind was elsewhere. Words like legacy, ownership, and Reeves looped in her head like a record stuck on a single line. Daniel walked beside her, hands tucked casually in the pockets of his dark coat, his pace measured to match hers. They weren't strangers anymore. But the new weight between them wasn't romantic or light-hearted. It was the shared gravity of a secret long buried. They stopped under the awning of a late-night corner store where a dull neon sign flickered. Daniel turned to face her fully, his voice low but steady. "Before we go any further, I need to show you something else." Sophia blinked, tightening her hold on the document. There's more? Yes. He glanced up and down the street, then back at her. But not here. I don't want to talk about Reeves out in the open. Come by my office tomorrow afternoon. It's on the top floor of the building. I'll have everything ready. His office. In the penthouse? The idea made her stomach flutter, not in the way one might expect when a billionaire invites you upstairs, but with a sharp blend of nervousness and resolve. This wasn't about her personal life anymore. This was about Emma's future, about the place she called home. The next day, after her shift, Sophia found herself standing outside the sleek glass doors that separated the penthouse level from the rest of Greenview Towers. She had never been up here before. The hallway was silent, lined with soft, recessed lighting and polished wooden panels that made the peeling paint on her floor feel like a different world entirely. Daniel greeted her at the door with his sleeves rolled up, looking more like a strategist in the middle of a late-night war room than a man entertaining a guest. His office wasn't ostentatious, but it carried a quiet power. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, dark shelves filled with neatly arranged files, and a single modern desk scattered with papers, not for show but for use. Come in, he said, gesturing her toward the desk. There's something you need to see. Sophia stepped forward slowly. On the desk lay a neat stack of documents, spreadsheets, and photographs. At the center, pinned to a corkboard, was what looked like a timeline, a sequence of property transfers, rent increases, and eviction notices that stretched back almost a decade. Daniel pointed to the beginning. Reeves started making small changes about 8 years ago, tiny rent hikes just above the legal threshold, cutting back on repairs, creating an environment that pushed long-time residents out, quiet, systematic. Sophia leaned closer, her brows knitting. She recognized some of the names on the eviction notices, families she had grown up with, elderly neighbors who'd lived in the building since before she was born. The Johnsons. They had to leave after the fire in their unit, she murmured. Daniel nodded. Exactly. And that fire was caused by faulty wiring Reeves ignored on purpose. After each family left, he converted the units and leased them to corporate tenants at inflated rates, funneling the extra income into shell accounts. He handed her a folder. Inside were copies of bank transfers, all tied to Reeves's name, and an LLC linked to Howard Kellerman, a name that made Daniel's tone harden when he spoke it. Kellerman's a developer, he explained. He's been buying up buildings around this neighborhood for years, pushing out tenants and flipping properties for luxury condos. Reeves has been feeding him information from the inside, priming this building for a takeover. Sophia's grip on the folder tightened. She flipped through the pages, her heart pounding. The evidence was meticulous. Contracts, wire transfers, even emails. How did you get all this? Daniel allowed a faint, humorless smile. Let's just say Blackwood Enterprises has better accountants than Reeves does. Once we purchased the holding company, I had every financial thread traced. And what we found was worse than I expected. She stared at the evidence laid out like an autopsy. He's been planning this for years, she whispered. Yes, Daniel said quietly. And if we don't stop him soon, Kellerman will move in, gut the building, and everyone, including you and Emma, will be forced out. Sophia took a step back, the weight of it all pressing on her chest. She had always known Reeves was manipulative, greedy. He was the type of man who looked at tenants like numbers, not people. But she had never imagined the scale of his scheme, that her home, the place she had fought so hard to keep, was part of a calculated plot. Daniel watched her carefully, his tone softening. I didn't tell you this to scare you. I told you because you have a role in this. You're not just another tenant, Sophia. You're Helen Carter's daughter. Legally and historically, this building is tied to your family. If we can prove the fraud, your claim could override theirs. She let out a shaky laugh, disbelieving. I'm a waitress with overdue bills. I don't know anything about property law. You don't have to, Daniel replied firmly. That's my job. But I can't do this alone. Reeves has kept people silent through fear and manipulation. You're one of the few voices that could break that pattern. People trust you. The words landed with unexpected weight. She thought of Mrs. Thompson watching Emma every day, of the neighbors who left casseroles at her door, of the hallway laughter and the lives intertwined in that old building. These weren't just tenants, they were a community, and Reeves was trying to erase it. Sophia met Daniel's gaze. What do you need me to do? His answer came without hesitation. Stand with me, and don't let Reeves scare you. If he realizes we're digging, he'll push back. Hard. She straightened her shoulders, the familiar flicker of resolve sparking in her chest. For years her world had been small. Work, Emma, survival. But this was bigger. This was her home. Her mother's legacy. And for the first time she wasn't just reacting to life. She was choosing to fight. I'm in, she said quietly, but with steel in her voice. Daniel's lips curved in a small, approving smile. Good, then we start tomorrow. The hallway outside Sophia's apartment was eerily quiet that night. A storm was brewing over the city, gathering clouds that cloaked the moon and pressed heavy against the skyline. Wind howled through the narrow gaps of old windows, making the building groan like something alive. Sophia tightened Emma's blanket and laid her down in the crib, kissing her tiny forehead. Sleep well, baby, she whispered, though something in her chest already felt uneasy. She double-checked the lock on the door out of habit. It wasn't much, just an aging deadbolt that stuck when the humidity rose, but it gave her a small sense of control in a world that often felt unpredictable. After the conversation with Daniel in his office, her mind had been spinning non-stop. Reeves's scheme, her mother's name on legal documents, the thought of her home being a target. It all felt too big, too tangled. But one thing was clear, they were on borrowed time. She was just about to sink into the couch with a cup of lukewarm tea when a faint sound cut through the storm's rising hum. A click. Not the pipes. Not the wind, the door. Her heart stopped. She turned her head slowly toward the entryway. Another sound followed, the unmistakable creak of hinges. Someone was inside. Sophia's pulse exploded in her ears. She slipped off the couch soundlessly, her bare feet pressing into the thin carpet. Her first instinct was Emma. She rushed to the crib, scooping her up carefully, pressing the baby to her chest. Emma stirred but didn't cry, a small mercy. In the dim light, Sophia's eyes caught the shadows of two figures moving near the door. Reeves's men. She recognized one of them, Mick, a maintenance worker who always lingered too long when talking to tenants, his greasy hair slicked back. He was whispering harshly to the other man as they moved deeper into the apartment, their flashlights sweeping across the walls and furniture like predators sniffing out prey. Check the bedroom, one hissed. Sophia's mind raced. She couldn't fight them. She couldn't risk Emma. The only exit was the front door, and they stood between her and it. She crept backward toward the small utility closet near the kitchen, heart hammering, and slipped inside, pulling the door almost shut. Darkness wrapped around her as she clutched Emma tightly, willing her baby to stay silent. Through the thin crack, she watched their movements. They rifled through drawers, flipped through photo albums, even pulled cushions off the couch. It was methodical, not random. They weren't looking for valuables, they were looking for something specific. Then Mick spoke, his voice a low growl. Reeves said it's here. Some kind of envelope. The old lady hid it before she died. If we don't find it tonight, Kellerman's going to lose his mind. Sophia's breath caught. Envelope. Her mother. Her instincts screamed that whatever they were after was connected to the trust document Daniel had mentioned. She'd grown up watching her mother hide important things in plain sight, inside books, behind framed photos, tucked into floorboards. But she'd never imagined their apartment would one day be searched like this. One of the men moved toward the bookshelf. He yanked down a row of old textbooks Helen had left behind. Sophia felt a surge of panic. Then something unexpected happened. There was a loud knock on the apartment door. Both men froze. "Management," a voice called out casually from the hallway.
"Everything okay in there?"
The men exchanged a quick glance.
"Let's move," Mick hissed.
They shoved the drawers closed, grabbed their flashlights, and slipped out through the back fire escape. Within seconds, the apartment was silent again except for the distant rumble of thunder. Sophia didn't move for a full minute. She stood in the darkness of the closet, heart racing, Emma pressed against her chest. Her legs felt numb when she finally stepped out. She checked the door, still slightly ajar, and then moved quickly through the apartment, her hands shaking. Everything was slightly out of place. They hadn't stolen anything, but their presence lingered like a stain. The knock came again, this time softer.
"Sophia, it's Mr. Hargrove," said the voice outside.
"Everything okay?" Mr. Hargrove was an elderly resident who lived 2 floors below. He'd been in the building for decades and acted as an unofficial hallway sentinel. She opened the door a crack, relief flooding her when she saw his familiar face. "I saw 2 men coming out of your fire escape," he whispered. "Did they hurt you?"
"No," she said shakily.
"They were looking for something." His brow furrowed deeply. "Your mama used to talk about some envelope she was keeping safe. She never told me what was in it, but she always said, 'If the day comes, Sophia will know where to look.'" He paused, eyes softening. "Do you?" Sophia's breath hitched. She turned toward the bookshelf, her mother's old teaching manuals stacked neatly on the bottom shelf. One of them, a thick history textbook, had always felt heavier than it should have. She knelt, pulled it out, and flipped it open. There it was, a thick manila envelope taped carefully to the inside of the back cover, sealed with wax and labeled in her mother's handwriting. "For Sophia, when the time comes." Her hands trembled as she pulled it free. The seal was unbroken, the edges untouched. She stared at it, feeling her mother's presence in every curve of the letters. Mr. Hargrove watched silently, understanding this wasn't the time to ask questions. Thunder cracked overhead, making Emma stir. Sophia held the envelope close, a strange mix of fear and strength blooming inside her chest. She didn't know what was inside yet, but she knew with a certainty that settled deep in her bones that it was important, maybe even the key to everything. She closed the door firmly, this time sliding the chain lock into place. Reeves had crossed a line, and whatever secrets her mother had left behind, she was ready to uncover them. The storm broke fully the next evening. Rain fell in relentless sheets against the windows of Greenview Towers, pooling on the cracked sidewalks and turning the streets below into mirror-like rivers. Inside Sophia's apartment, the steady drumming on the glass mixed with Emma's soft breathing as she slept in her crib. The manila envelope lay on the kitchen table, unopened, but radiating a quiet power. Every time Sophia passed it, she felt her mother's presence pressing at the edges of the room, warm, protective, insistent. She hadn't called Daniel yet. She needed to catch her breath first. The break-in had left her shaken. She'd barely slept. Her mind kept replaying the flashlights sweeping across her walls, the hissed whispers about the envelope. She knew Reeves wouldn't give up. If anything, his next move would be worse. She was right. Across town, in the dimly lit back office of Kellerman Real Estate Holdings, Victor Reeves paced like a caged animal. Rain streaked the windows, lightning flashing intermittently, carving sharp lines across his face. Howard Kellerman sat calmly behind the desk, a large man in his 60s with thinning silver hair slicked back, wearing a perfectly tailored navy suit. His calmness was more dangerous than Reeves's agitation. "You said you had the situation under control," Kellerman said evenly, his voice almost soft. It was the kind of softness that made Reeves's stomach knot. "I do," Reeves snapped, though sweat prickled at his collar. "The envelope wasn't there."
"But we searched everywhere. Then you didn't search well enough." Kellerman leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on the polished desk.
That document is the last thread holding that building back from being mine. If the girl finds it, this entire deal collapses. Years of work gone, Reeves swallowed. She's just a waitress with a baby. She won't. She's Helen Carter's daughter, Kellerman cut in sharply. And if she inherited even half her mother's stubbornness, she'll become a problem. His voice lowered almost to a purr. We can't afford problems. Lightning flashed, illuminating their faces for a heartbeat, one calculating, one increasingly desperate. Kellerman slid a folder across the desk. Inside were architectural renderings and blueprints of Greenview Towers post-renovation, luxury condos, rooftop garden, boutique shops on the ground floor. Reeves had seen them a dozen times before, but now they looked like a finish line slipping away. You have 1 week, Kellerman said. After that, the board pulls out, the financing disappears, and your little empire crumbles. Do I make myself clear? Reeves clenched his fists.
Crystal. As he left the office, rain slamming against his coat, his mind churned darkly.
The envelope had to be found or destroyed, and if that meant taking drastic measures, so be it. Sophia finally called Daniel the following afternoon. Her voice trembled only slightly as she recounted everything. The break-in, the whispered orders, Mr. Hargrove's warning, and finally, the discovery of the envelope. I haven't opened it yet, she admitted.
I don't know why.
It feels like if I open it, everything changes. Daniel's voice on the other end was steady but urgent.
Sophia, you need to bring it to me.
Whatever your mother left behind could be exactly what we need to stop Reeves and Kellerman legally. She glanced toward Emma, who was playing with a soft toy on the floor, babbling happily. I'll come tonight, she said. But she never got the chance. That night, just as the storm began to ease, Daniel was in his penthouse office reviewing the security footage from the building's old cameras when something caught his eye. 2 figures, Reeves and Mick, were in the basement maintenance room, long after visiting hours.
Reeves carried a duffel bag.
Mick held what looked unmistakably like 2 canisters of gasoline. Daniel's blood ran cold. He enlarged the feed. Reeves moved with a frantic energy, gesturing toward the building's boiler system, pointing at the ground-level storage areas. Mick followed orders quickly, setting the canisters near the electrical panels. Their voices weren't audible, but their intentions were clear. This wasn't a bluff. They were preparing to burn the building down. Daniel's reaction was immediate. He grabbed his coat, his mind already calculating the timeline. If Reeves was setting up for arson, he'd likely wait until after midnight. Minimal witnesses, maximum chaos. It gave them only a few hours. He dialed Sophia, his voice sharper than she'd ever heard. Sophia, listen to me carefully. Reeves is planning something tonight.
I need you to pack a bag for Emma and leave the building immediately. Her breath hitched. What? Why? No time, he interrupted.
Get out. Now, she didn't argue. Within minutes, she was stuffing essentials into a worn duffel. Baby formula, diapers, a change of clothes, the envelope. Emma sensed the urgency, her wide eyes following her mother's every movement. Sophia whispered, It's okay, baby. We're okay, though her hands shook as she zipped the bag. Just as she was heading for the door, the lights flickered. Then they went out completely. The entire building plunged into darkness. Sophia froze, her breath caught. In the silence that followed, she heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps in the stairwell, heavy, purposeful. She clutched Emma to her chest and reached for her phone, but there was no signal. The storm must have knocked out the cell tower. Meanwhile, Daniel was already on his way down, taking the service elevator with a flashlight in one hand and his phone pressed to his ear.
Trying to get through to the fire department.
Electrical arson, he barked when someone finally answered. Greenview Towers?
Evacuate the block. Sophia crept toward her door and peered through the peephole.
2 men moved through the hallway, their flashlights cutting through the darkness.
Mick was one of them.
He carried something heavy in his hands, another gasoline canister. They were moving floor by floor. Outside, thunder rolled again. The storm wasn't finished. It was gathering strength for one last surge. Sophia's heart pounded as she backed away from the door. She knew Daniel would come for her. She knew she had to stay calm for Emma. But this was no longer just about property deeds or hidden envelopes. Reeves was ready to destroy everything to keep his secret buried. And tonight, fire was coming. The power outage had turned Greenview Towers into a silent maze. Shadows stretched long across the narrow hallways, broken only by the occasional flash of lightning slicing through the stairwell windows. The air smelled faintly of rain and gasoline, a warning hanging heavy and unseen. Sophia held Emma tightly against her chest, her back pressed to the wall just inside her apartment door. The building had gone unnervingly still. Somewhere below she heard the echo of footsteps, measured, purposeful, getting closer with every passing second. Her pulse pounded in her ears like a drumbeat. She wasn't just a tenant tonight. She was a mother, a daughter, and the unwitting keeper of something Reeves wanted badly enough to burn everything down for. She tightened her grip on the manila envelope, tucked into the side pocket of the duffel bag. Whatever her mother had left behind, it was clearly powerful enough to terrify men like Reeves and Kellerman, and now it might be the only thing keeping Emma and her neighbors safe. Meanwhile, Daniel moved through the stairwell like a man trained for crisis. His flashlight beam cut a steady path through the darkness, his mind a flurry of calculations. He had called the fire department, units were en route, but time was the enemy now.
If Reeves was planning to ignite the basement, they had minutes, maybe less, before the building became a death trap. On the fourth-floor landing, he stopped abruptly. Voices 2 floors below. "Start in the basement," Mick whispered.
Reeves said we drench the storage rooms first. By the time anyone realizes what's happening, it'll be too late. And the girl? The second man asked. She's not going anywhere. Daniel's grip on the flashlight tightened until his knuckles whitened. He didn't hesitate. He moved quietly down the stairs, staying just out of their line of sight, listening for Reeves. If he knew Victor Reeves, the man wouldn't delegate the most important part. He'd want to oversee it himself. On Sophia's floor, the faint light of her phone screen illuminated her determined face. She tried calling Daniel again. No signal. She knew staying inside wasn't an option anymore. She grabbed the duffel bag, whispered a soft, "Hold on, baby," to Emma, and cracked the door open just enough to peer into the hallway. 2 flashlights appeared at the far end. Reeves. And Mick. Sophia's breath caught. Reeves's expression was sharper than she'd ever seen, his usual smug arrogance replaced by a cold, almost frantic intensity. He looked like a man who had already decided that tonight nothing would stop him. "Check every apartment," Reeves hissed.
"She has it. I want that envelope before we light anything." Sophia's heart slammed against her ribs.
She glanced behind her. The only other exit was the fire escape through Emma's small bedroom. But it was raining hard, and with a baby in her arms, the slick metal stairs were a dangerous gamble. She didn't have time to choose. Reeves suddenly turned his head, eyes narrowing. He'd caught the slight movement of her door.
"Hi there," he barked. Sophia slammed it shut, locked the deadbolt, and ran to Emma's room.
Lightning flashed through the window, followed by a deafening crash as Reeves's boot struck the door. The wood splintered under the second hit. She fumbled with the fire escape latch, rain blowing in her face through the narrow opening. Emma whimpered against her shoulder.
"Shh, sweetheart."
"Mommy's got you," she whispered, voice trembling. Reeves's third kick broke the lock. The door burst open. "Sophia," he shouted, his voice slick with fury.
"Hand it over and this doesn't have to get ugly."
She turned, her back to the open window, holding Emma close. "You're not getting anything," she spat, surprising even herself with the steadiness of her voice. Reeves stepped forward, dripping wet from the storm, flashlight in one hand and a small gas can in the other. "You have no idea what you're messing with."
"That document doesn't belong to you." "It belonged to my mother," she shot back.
"And this building belonged to her family long before you started lining your pockets with lies." For a brief moment, something flickered in his eyes, not guilt, but the irritation of someone who had underestimated his opponent.
"You think that piece of paper will stop Kellerman? Stop me?"
"We've already won." "No," another voice cut through the room. "You haven't." Daniel stood in the doorway, soaked from the rain, flashlight held like a weapon. His presence filled the room with a sudden, grounding steadiness.
Reeves spun toward him, momentarily startled. "You?" Reeves sneered.
"I should have known you'd stick your nose where it doesn't belong." "This building belongs to her family," Daniel said evenly, stepping forward. "And arson isn't exactly a clean way to handle a property dispute," Reeves laughed, low and bitter.
"You can't prove anything."
"By the time the fire department gets here, this place will be ashes." Daniel's eyes hardened. "They're already on their way." For the first time, Reeves's composure faltered. Mick appeared behind him, shifting nervously.
"Vic, maybe we should—" "Shut up!" Reeves barked. The standoff stretched in the flickering flashlight beams.
Sophia pressed herself against the wall. Emma held close, watching Daniel and Reeves face each other like two forces colliding.
Lightning flashed again, thunder booming so loud it shook the window pane. Then Reeves lunged. Daniel reacted instantly, intercepting him mid-stride.
The two men collided, crashing into the hallway. The duffel bag slipped from Sophia's shoulder, skidding across the floor. She watched as Reeves clawed for it even while grappling with Daniel.
He didn't care about the fight.
He cared about that envelope. Sophia didn't hesitate. She grabbed the bag, clutching it to her chest, and ran toward the stairwell. Emma cried now, frightened by the chaos, but Sophia kept moving, adrenaline surging through every nerve. Behind her, she heard the thud of fists, the sound of boots scraping against tile. "Sophia, go!" Daniel shouted between blows. She didn't look back. She bolted into the stairwell, rain gusting through a broken window, her heart hammering with the knowledge that this wasn't over. Not yet. Down below, faintly, she could hear the first distant wail of sirens cutting through the storm. Help was coming, but so was fire. The stairwell smelled of damp concrete and gasoline. Sophia's shoes slapped against the steps as she descended, the duffel bag bumping against her hip with every stride. Emma's cries echoed in the narrow shaft, mixing with the distant growl of thunder outside and the faint, rising chorus of sirens. Somewhere above, a loud crash reverberated. A door?
A struggle?
She didn't stop to check. Daniel was buying her time, and she had to make it count. On the third-floor landing, she paused, chest heaving, and pressed herself against the wall. Her fingers shook as she reached into the bag and pulled out the manila envelope. The wax seal, still unbroken, gleamed faintly in the emergency light spilling from the stairwell exit sign. She knew deep in her bones that whatever was inside this envelope held the key to everything Reeves was willing to burn down a building to destroy. "Okay, Mom," she whispered, her voice breaking slightly. "Show me." She slid her thumb under the seal and cracked it open. Inside was a stack of legal documents, yellowed slightly with age but meticulously organized. The top page was a notarized trust deed dated 25 years ago. Her eyes scanned the names: Helen Carter, Greenview Towers, Martinez Family Trust. As she flipped through the pages, her pulse quickened. The deed transferred ownership of the building to Helen's family trust after her parents passed, with strict stipulations: no sale to outside developers without the family's consent, protections for long-term tenants, and inheritance rights to Helen's sole heir, Sophia Martinez. She pressed a hand to her mouth. Her mother hadn't just raised her alone while working as a teacher. She had quietly safeguarded their community, building legal walls against predatory developers like Kellerman. Reeves hadn't just stolen property. He had violated a trust built on decades of family legacy. Behind the legal papers was a handwritten letter. Sophia unfolded it with trembling fingers. "My sweet Sophia, if you're reading this, it means the time has come. The building is yours, not just the walls and bricks, but the people inside. Protect them, the way your grandparents and I tried to protect you. I know it's a lot to carry, but you have my strength. And you won't be alone. Someone out there owes us a debt."
When the time comes, he will help you.
Mom tears blurred Sophia's vision. The letter smelled faintly of old paper and lavender, her mother's scent. She pressed it to her chest for a brief, shuddering breath. Then a loud crash echoed from above, followed by Daniel's voice shouting something she couldn't make out. She didn't have time to sit with the emotions. She shoved the documents back into the envelope and ran down the last flights of stairs, emerging into the lobby just as the first fire truck screeched to a halt outside. Rain slanted through the broken front doors as firefighters rushed in, shouting orders. The building manager's desk was deserted. The lobby lights were dead. Sophia waved frantically at one of the firefighters.
"There are people upstairs. There's gasoline in the basement. They're trying to burn the building down."
She yelled over the storm. The man's face hardened. He barked orders into his radio, and within seconds, a coordinated response snapped into motion. Firefighters fanned out toward the basement and upper floors. 2 officers moved toward her. "Ma'am, are you the one who called this in?" one of them asked. She shook her head. "No, Daniel Blackwood. He's still upstairs with Victor Reeves." The officers exchanged a quick look. "Blackwood?"
"As in Blackwood Enterprises."
"Yes," she said.
"He owns the building now, but it belongs to my family. I have proof." She held up the envelope, soaked from the rain but intact. "Stay here," one of them ordered.
"We'll get your statement once the building's secured." But Sophia wasn't done yet. Meanwhile, upstairs, Daniel and Reeves crashed into the hallway wall, their flashlights spinning wildly across the floor. Reeves was stronger than Daniel expected. Panic had given him a wild, erratic energy. He swung the gas can like a weapon, narrowly missing Daniel's head. "You think you can take this from me?" Reeves snarled.
"I built this place up. I made it profitable."
"You bled it dry," Daniel shot back, blocking another swing and shoving Reeves hard. "You turn people's homes into leverage. Helen Carter's trust was meant to protect this building, and you've done nothing but exploit it." Reeves froze. "What did you say?" Daniel's lips curled into a grim smile. "She found the documents." For the first time, genuine fear flashed across Reeves's face. "No, yes," Daniel said, advancing.
"It's over, Victor.
"The police are downstairs. The fire department's here."
And Kellerman won't save you when this hits the courts." Reeves's expression twisted. "No one's taking this from me," he growled.
Then he turned and bolted toward the stairwell. Daniel sprinted after him. Back in the lobby, Sophia spotted Reeves descending the stairs like a man possessed, his face pale and eyes darting wildly.
She didn't run.
She stood her ground, clutching the envelope in one hand and Emma in the other. Behind her, firefighters were shouting, radios crackling. The building was alive with urgency now, no longer silent. Reeves stopped when he saw her. For a heartbeat, they stared at each other through the rain-slicked air of the lobby. Thief and heir, predator and protector. "Give it to me," Reeves hissed. "No," she said simply. Her voice didn't shake this time. He took a step forward, but the sound of boots and shouting filled the lobby as police officers flooded in from the street. Reeves froze. 2 officers raised their weapons.
"Victor Reeves!" one barked. "Put your hands where we can see them."
Reeves's shoulders slumped, the fight draining from him like water down a drain. Daniel appeared seconds later, bruised but breathing, and came to stand beside Sophia. They watched silently as Reeves was handcuffed, his protests drowned out by the chaos of firefighters dousing the basement. Sophia clutched the envelope tighter, feeling its weight differently now, not as a burden, but as proof. Her mother's legacy had survived the fire before it even started. Outside, the rain eased to a steady drizzle, as the building filled with flashing red and blue lights. Firefighters secured the area. Tenants gathered in small, shivering groups on the sidewalk, wrapped in blankets, whispering anxiously. When Sophia stepped out holding Emma, their eyes turned to her, not as the struggling waitress they'd always known, but as someone standing at the center of the storm with something unshakable in her hands. Daniel stepped up beside her, resting a hand lightly on her shoulder. "You did it," he said quietly. She shook her head. "We did." The rain had finally stopped by morning. Soft, silvery light spilled over Greenview Towers, glistening off puddles that reflected the building's scarred facade. Yellow police tape fluttered across the entrance, cordoning off the lobby where firefighters and investigators still moved in and out. The smell of smoke lingered faintly, mingling with the cool, clean air after the storm. Sophia stood on the sidewalk, wrapped in a wool blanket someone had handed her during the night. Emma was nestled peacefully against her chest, asleep despite the bustle. For the first time in what felt like forever, Sophia wasn't running, hiding, or reacting. She was standing still, watching the aftermath unfold around her. Reeves had been taken away in handcuffs hours earlier, his face pale and defiant as flashing lights lit up the street. Mick and the other accomplice had followed, heads hung. Firefighters confirmed the basement had been soaked in gasoline, but the quick response had prevented disaster. Daniel's call had saved lives. Her envelope had saved the building. Daniel approached from behind, his dark coat damp, hair tousled from the long night. He handed her a coffee cup, warm against her cold fingers. "You holding up?" he asked softly. She exhaled slowly, a wry smile ghosting across her lips. "I think I'm still processing that my building was almost set on fire." He gave a small laugh, one that carried exhaustion more than amusement. "You were incredible last night, Sophia. You didn't just survive, you fought back." She looked up at the old building. In the grey light, it didn't look grand or glamorous. The paint was peeling, the windows rattled in the breeze, the stairwells were drafty, but it was home. Her mother had fought to keep it safe, and now it was her turn. 3 weeks later, Sophia found herself sitting at a long mahogany conference table inside a law firm downtown, her hands resting on the smooth wood. Emma slept quietly in her stroller beside her. Sunlight poured in through tall windows, catching the golden lettering on the wall. Blackwood and Associates, Real Estate Division. Across from her sat Daniel, his suit crisp, posture confident, but his expression gentle when he looked at her. Beside him was a grey-haired lawyer named Margaret Benson, who specialized in property trusts. Margaret adjusted her glasses and tapped the folder in front of her. "Ms. Martinez, we've reviewed the documents your mother left behind. The trust deed is valid and ironclad. The ownership of Greenview Towers legally reverted to you the moment your mother passed, but Reeves filed forged transfers to mask the change. It's going to take some legal maneuvering to unwind his fraud, but you have a strong case." Sophia's stomach fluttered.
"So, I actually own it?"
Margaret's eyes softened. "You don't just own it. You inherited a community. Your mother made sure this building couldn't be sold out from under its tenants. You have the legal authority to restore those protections." Daniel leaned forward slightly. "Reeves's accounts have been frozen. Kellerman's deal collapsed the moment the trust documents surfaced. Their lawyers are scrambling, but the DA's office is confident about the charges: fraud, conspiracy, attempted arson. You're in a good position, Sophia." Sophia looked down at her hands. A month ago, she'd been a waitress just trying to keep a leaky roof over her baby's head. Now she was sitting at a conference table, discussing legal ownership of an entire building. The weight of it was both terrifying and thrilling. "I don't know anything about running a building," she admitted quietly. Daniel's smile was warm but firm. "That's what I'm here for. If you want, Blackwood Enterprises can help you restructure management. We can repair the infrastructure, upgrade safety systems, bring the building back to life."
"On your terms?" She studied him for a long moment.
His offer wasn't transactional, it was steady, like a hand extended not to take but to support. She thought of the night in the elevator, of how everything began not with a business deal, but with kindness. Him helping her change Emma's diaper under flickering emergency lights, talking softly like someone who genuinely cared. Finally, she nodded.
Okay, but I want to learn. I don't want someone else taking over what my family built. His smile deepened.
Good. That's exactly what your mum would have wanted. The next week, the lobby of Greenview Towers bustled like it hadn't in years. Contractors walked through with blueprints. Tenants peeked curiously from their doors. Sophia stood in the center of it all, clipboard in hand, Emma strapped to her chest in a baby carrier. She wore jeans and a plain sweater, but there was something new in her posture. Shoulders squared, chin lifted. Not arrogance, ownership. Mrs. Thompson, the elderly neighbor who'd always watched Emma when Sophia worked, shuffled over and squeezed her hand.
Your mama would be so proud, she whispered. Sophia blinked back tears.
I hope so. Daniel was there too, standing near the entrance, discussing plans with a group of engineers. Every so often his gaze flicked toward her, not as a CEO observing a tenant, but as someone quietly invested in her success. She caught his eye once, and they shared a brief smile, soft, knowing, unhurried. A month later, she stood on the rooftop for the first time. The view stretched over the city like an open book. Rooftops, traffic, the golden glow of sunset spilling between buildings. It wasn't a penthouse view, not like Daniel's, but it was hers. Emma cooed softly in her arms. Sophia pressed a kiss to her daughter's hair and whispered, "We did it, baby."
We really did. She thought of her mother's letter.
Of the people downstairs who'd trusted her, of Daniel's unwavering presence, of the night she was just a tired waitress stuck in a broken elevator with a stranger. Every step since had been terrifying, messy, and real. But it had led her here, to the beginning of something entirely new. The rooftop was quiet, except for the soft hum of the city below. Golden sunlight bathed the edges of the rooftop garden planters, which had been neglected for years, but now held the promise of something new. Fresh soil, tiny sprouts and handwritten notes from tenants about what flowers they wanted to grow. It wasn't glamorous, but it felt alive. Sophia leaned against the railing, holding Emma in her arms. The baby was drowsy, lulled by the evening breeze, her tiny fist curled around a strand of her mother's hair. The city stretched endlessly before them, glowing under the warm light. For the first time in her adult life, Sophia didn't feel like she was watching the world from the outside. She was part of it. She heard footsteps behind her, slow and familiar. Daniel's voice came, softer than usual.
I thought I might find you up here, she turned, smiling.
He stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, jacket unbuttoned, tie loosened, less CEO, more man. The wind teased his hair, and the fading sunlight caught the edges of his face, softening the usual sharpness. He looked tired, but in a way that suggested contentment, not burden. It's my favorite spot now, she said. Feels like the city looks different from up here. It does, he replied, stepping closer. Especially when you're the one who saved it? She let out a quiet laugh, shaking her head.
I didn't save anything alone. I just
stopped running long enough to fight. That's more than most people ever do, he said. His voice held that quiet steadiness she'd come to recognize. No grand gestures, no manipulation, just honest admiration. They stood side by side, watching the sun dip lower. For a moment, silence wrapped around them like a warm blanket. Below, the sounds of the neighborhood drifted upward, children playing in the courtyard, a distant radio, the clang of construction tools as workers wrapped up for the day. Life was moving forward, and so were they. Sophia adjusted Emma in her arms. You know, she said softly, when we got stuck in that elevator, I thought you were just some uptight guy from the penthouse.
I didn't expect any of this, Daniel chuckled.
And I thought you were just a tired woman with the world on her shoulders. He paused. Turns out I was right, but I also underestimated just how strong you are. She rolled her eyes playfully, but warmth bloomed in her chest. No one had ever said that to her without pity attached. But from him, it didn't feel like flattery. It felt like truth. Daniel leaned his elbows on the railing beside her, gazing out over the skyline. "You know, I keep thinking about your mom," he said. "She saved my life when I was a teenager."
That fire, it changed everything. I never got to repay her. I didn't even know how. Sophia looked at him, her expression softening.
"You did. You showed up when it mattered." He turned to her then, really turned, his eyes meeting hers in that slow, deliberate way that made the air feel different.
"I think," he said quietly, "she'd be proud of you." Sophia's throat tightened.
She blinked back tears and managed a shaky smile.
"I hope so," Emma stirred, letting out a tiny squeak.
Daniel extended his hands, a silent question. "May I?" Sophia hesitated for a split second, then handed Emma over. Daniel cradled the baby with a tenderness that still surprised her every time. He looked down at her as if she were something miraculous, not fragile. "She's growing fast," he said. "Too fast," Sophia murmured. "Sometimes I worry I'll blink and she'll be off to college." He laughed softly. "She's got a mother's strength. She'll be okay." The way he said it, gently, confidently, made her chest tighten in a way that wasn't fear anymore. It was something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Possibility. The sun finally dipped below the skyline, leaving behind streaks of pink and gold. Daniel handed Emma back, and she nestled against Sophia's shoulder, already drifting off again. They stood there, neither rushing to leave nor filling the silence with unnecessary words. Eventually, Daniel said, "So, what's next for Sophia Martinez?" She exhaled, smiling at the question.
"I rebuild. I learn how to run a building. I try not to mess up too badly. I make this place better for Emma, for everyone who lives here. And personally?"
he asked gently, not pushing, just curious. Sophia met his gaze, the evening breeze lifting strands of her hair. "Personally," she said slowly, "I think, for the first time in a long time, I'm open to whatever comes. I'm not scared of it anymore." His smile was small but real. "That sounds like a good plan." As they made their way downstairs together, Sophia glanced back at the rooftop. The city lights had taken over the sky now, twinkling like stars against the darkening horizon. Life wasn't perfect. There were still legal battles ahead, repairs to manage, bills to figure out. But she wasn't alone anymore. She had a building to protect, a daughter to raise, and maybe, just maybe, something new growing quietly between her and the man who had once been just a stranger in a broken elevator. The story wasn't ending, it was beginning.